Mr Chairman, I want to address a couple of things that have come up so far in the previous discussion and are being repeated now in this part of the bill. Firstly, the Labor opposition are saying that the concerns they have are around security of supply, price and sustainability. Well, looking at those three things, this is this review of how electricity is governed and the regulations around the production of electricity and the sale of electricity comes on the back of a period under the previous government where we had several electricity crises during that time, so-called dry years. And the one thing that is really interesting to me is that we actually never ran out of electricity during that time. And that raises the issue as to whether or not the way in which the governance of the sector, the way in which the views on the worth of the water and the worth of storage were properly being considered. And that's why the government has looked at the asset swaps to get a different view. It's why we've looked at virtual swaps of large tranches of electricity, and it's why we're looking at having a more liquid hedge market. Mr Speaker, on the issue of price, I want to make it very clear, I have never at any point, and no one will find a quote from me saying that we will bring electricity prices down. I have repeatedly said that we will get a more stable price path for electricity. And one of the things I'd point out is that in the May to May year, 29-210, the average electricity price rise was 2.9%. That compares to over 9% or over 8% for each of the previous 8 years under the last government. So I think there is a very good trend there at least. With regards to the situation in Dunedin, I would simply say to Dunedin residents, if one company is jacking their prices up through the roof, look around and see who isn't. Because there has never been more choice for people in that city than is the case at the moment, and that is driven directly out of the ability of Genesis Energy to ensure their own supply into that market. On the issue of sustainability, we recently were able to report once again that New Zealand is enjoying the benefits of very high levels of sustainably produced electricity, 73% in the latest Energy Quarterly. I want to concede that part of that is because of the commitment to thermal generation made by the previous government. But it's also a fact that there is a geothermal generation made by the previous government. The former minister is right to correct that. But it's also worth pointing out that at Huntly at the moment, coal is being replaced as a fuel by gas, and that is having a very positive effect on reducing emissions from that important piece of kit in the New Zealand electricity system. Mr Speaker, the question was raised about this bill not dealing with prices. Well, the people who are raising that question totally failed to deal with outrageous prices for a very long period of time. This at least creates an environment where there is pressure on retail sales, where there is ability for others to enter a market, and where there is capacity for companies to secure a supply that means they can meet their consumers' demands. In relation to the Electricity Commission, set up by the previous government with a broad range of things it was required to do, and the Electricity Authority set up by this bill, which is a much smaller range of things to do, I think that's appropriate. One of the most important things they'll do is make rules. And one of the failures in the system that I saw was that ministers were required to sign off on rules. Well, quite frankly, there would be few ministers who have the time to read what those rules are about, let alone understand what they're about. And I think having an authority that has a better focus on that will see us with a better arrangement, a more sure and secure arrangement. Might I also say that the issues raised about energy efficiency are important. Two things that I can say there. Firstly, the current government has funded the energy spot on national television. It runs many times during the week and gives people practical tips about how they might reduce their energy bills. Further, we've committed a large tranche of funding to the home insulation program and the clean heat program, which is also seeing literally tens of thousands of New Zealanders now in warmer, drier homes where the energy efficiency will be much improved. Might I also say that the funding flow now is to ECA, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, and they are going to be required Mr. Chair, they are going to be required to engage in a broader program for getting a better approach to energy efficiency. One of the things that I hope they'll pick up very quickly, and it's a little outside the purpose of this Act, is around the issue of industrial use of electricity, business use of electricity, commercial use of electricity, where it is, I am told, the possibility exists for very, very substantial savings in the amount of energy this country uses. I don't discount the idea of a notional power station, which indicates to people on a year-by-year basis how much efficiency we've managed to get across the country. I think it's an extremely important thing, and I think taking that role away from the Electricity Authority, formerly the Commission, and putting it with ECA is going to give the public a great deal more confidence about the information that will be provided to them. Mr. Speaker, I want to raise the issue of the ETS. While some power companies may have suggested that the ETS is the reason for their power hikes, I've repeatedly said I think that's unreasonable. The fact is that 73% of electricity sold in this country in the last quarter was generated from renewable sources, therefore 25% from thermal. That would indicate that there is a much lesser draw on the requirement. The government has capped the price of CO2 emissions at $25 a tonne, effectively though, meaning the industry pays half of the cost at $12.50. Given that the average price appears to have been something between $18 and $18.50 recently, that puts it back to $9, and I think that the costs that some companies are applying are excessive, and we've said that we will want to have a good look at that as we go forward. Mr. Speaker, I do note that we would have a long way to go to use up the $100 a week extra that superannuitants are now getting since this government was elected on electricity charges than was the case under the previous government. And while Ms Curran might be concerned about one company jacking its prices up by 9% in one part of the country, that was the average. That was the average price increase for 8 years. And not only was the price going through the roof, we had these so-called electricity shortages. And while I will admit that some of that will be due to the hydrology, not at the frequency that we saw over those years. That's why we are looking at the issue of asset swaps. It's why we're looking at having virtual swaps among those companies so that there are balanced obligations. It finally means that what should have been in place for years between the very large hydro generator in the South Island and the very large thermal generator in the North Island are being put in place, and there's plenty of evidence of that. Those will create a more secure environment. And Mr. Speaker, I think it's unreasonable to suggest that this bill may not be, that the Crown may not be capable of being bound by this Act, when clearly the previous government had absolutely no evidence to suggest that they were bound by previous Acts. None of the predictions that were made by previous ministers came to pass. I can at least say that since we started down this process, things have greatly improved for consumers. That is a completely unarguable position. And Mr. Speaker, I do look forward to reasonable discussions about the way in which aspects of this bill might be applied, but I think in a general sense, suggesting that everything was better the way it was before is a completely wrong position. If the Labor Party want to argue that we should have done nothing, just carried on with the way things were, then what they're saying is that New Zealanders were condemned to 9 and 10% price rises per annum for their electricity. We've at least rejected that and had a bit of a go here at seeing if we can straighten things out and get a little bit of a better and more reasonable arrangement for the way in which electricity is marketed and sold. There is no backing off the idea that the best form of investment should be chosen every time. And what we're seeing at the moment is the best form of investment appears to be in geothermal. We certainly encourage that. But I wouldn't in any way want to take away the opportunity for electricity companies to look at gas where it's needed. There are a number of projects on the books. I hope that they are developed because it is a much lesser carbon profile than coal and it does provide very fast, very instant backup to a system, particularly where you've got wind that may drop off very, very quickly. And, Mr Speaker, I think over-reliance on that particular fuel source would be a disaster for New Zealand.